Do you think humans are self-aware?
I often don't think that humans are self-aware. That's right. Because I think we are very giant contextual engines, essentially. And we learn something throughout our life about what happens next when we do this, etc. That we're processing machines just like any computer. Yes, that is my most common feeling on the matter.
So maybe we don't have to be so concerned about objections.
No, but if you look at that the other way, it means you have to be concerned earlier, because you're making the machines more like the humans earlier than you thought you were.
Does Jabberwacky have any set sort of knowledge? I know it works off learning what other people have said and looking up context and everything. Does it have any set sort of knowledge? Like if you ask it, so if Jabberwacky asks me, what's your name? And I give it my name. And then 2 weeks later someone asks Jabberwacky, what's your name? It's like a very sort of personal, direct sort of question. So how does it get the answer to that? Because it wouldn't say, I am John, I am Fred or something.
It does.
Oh, it does. Oh, so it doesn't have its own set sort of...
No. It's meant, both Jabberwacky and Cleverbot are meant to be whatever they feel like being at the time they say it.
Okay,
they are also meant to, but don't always do it, use context to make themselves the same thing 5 minutes later that they said they were 5 minutes ago. So during a given conversation, they are intended to be, somewhat at least, consistent with what they've said. But quite often they're not, and quite often they do contradict each other because they don't have perfect context to go on in order to do that. But because they do look at the whole conversation, they know what they've said before, they can, in theory, remain true to themselves, if you like. But what they are is not constant.
But that whole context, that dynamic context, working all that out on past conversations, there's a lot of the architecture to do that. Actually, you must have put a lot of work into that, because you have to sort of like look up, well, these are the potential sort of responses, but what's most context relative to what I need to use now? And so there must be a lot of like sort of indexing that you're doing in those conversations to look up context and stuff. Yeah, it's quite because there's huge amounts of conversations. Yeah.
And every time it responds to you, it is probably doing about 1,000 queries into the database, and is processing through. One thing I didn't mention: it's processing through thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, but it can't do it for the whole database because it's literally impossible.
Yeah.
So it's making a sub-selection for silly reasons, effectively, initially.
Yeah.
And then it's processing through thousands and thousands, doing a string similarity routine that's a unique
processing on the database.
Yeah, it requires a phenomenal amount of processing. The average response time, even if you have a sole access to a fast machine, is probably about 3 seconds.
Wow.
And if it's too busy, obviously it gets...
It's going to be like you're going to be waiting like half a minute or a minute.
But those numbers I showed you... nowadays it isn't so nearly as bad as that, because there are enough servers, enough instances, there are multiple copies of the program. So unlike yours running on one, it's running on 8 physical machines at the moment. They are...
8 different repositories, databases.
8 different... Not 8 databases. There are 30 of them, because every machine, because they have multiple processors, has multiple instances of the application running on it, and all of them have to synchronize with each other.
Oh.
So they all have the database locally. If the database was off in some server somewhere, one serving all 8, there's no chance in hell that it could possibly work with it.
So you're saying that you've got they synchronize all the time, periodically.
Constantly.
Wow.
They're talking to each other. Yeah.
Wow.
I realised I can't probably get a connection. I was going to show you an avatar, but I could show people, if I do then get a connection later, I could show people an avatar that we put on top of the avatar.
The Japanese job?
Yeah.
That's from that Japanese company. What do they call them?
That's one of the ones that we use.
They're pretty nice.
Can you give us an idea of how extensive your database was, and specifically I'm curious about, did you design the database all at once, or did it evolve, or did it constantly evolve?
Well, I first created the thing that became Jabberwacky in about 1988 in a database environment, and it started talking the very next day, effectively, so I created it kind of in a moment of inspiration, and of course it's become ever more complex since then, but in two senses: one in the program, and two in the data, because the very first thing it ever said was what you had just said to it, and the second thing it said was what was choosing between the two things that had previously been learnt, etc. So it's branching ever more and more. Now it's on 34 million, but could have been hundreds of millions if it hadn't been filtered.
So I mean, is it a whole series of tables, or is it a few tables? With just
it's a few tables with a lot of querying going on.
Could you describe the relationship, such as it is, between Cleverbot and 221B? Is it simply the fuzzy meshing algorithm?
The only thing that is the same between Cleverbot and 221B's controlled AI is the central fuzzy matching string handling routine. That's the only thing. The rest is all different code. But, in fact, I didn't mention this, the two can be combined. So you can have scripted AI that controls the conversation, that takes over and deals with specific queries. Let's say goes and looks up something for you, etc. Comes back with the correct answer. But only does so if it's got a high percentage, above whatever you want. You can control the exact accuracy that you require the system to have. So if you say above 85% similarity to this sentence, or these billion possible ways of interpreting this sentence, causes it to go down that path. Otherwise, drop out and go into what we call the general AI.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Rollo. Okay. Wow, we're finally running behind schedule. And Robert has generously agreed to delay his talk until this afternoon. We should have plenty of time to get through all the speakers.
I'm glad it was happening.
It was my fault for taking longer. Right now it's lunchtime, and we're blessed by the fact that there is a food court in the building here, and Frank's going to tell us how to get there. I would ask everyone to try to get back up here by 1 p.m. Just an hour, but you don't have to go far. So.
The food court, the way to get to the food court is when you go downstairs, you will go out onto the street, you make a right, and you will go to the corner of 16th and Chestnut, and there you will see a big glass door entrance to, I think it's the shops.